Thank you for joining us today at Sci-Fi Journal, Nick Cole.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Jason. It's a pleasure.
So, Nick, I guess the first thing to do, who are you for those who don't know you?
A lot of people would know me from sort of the blush of the 2011 indie revolution on the Amazon explosion of self-publishing KDP Digital. I wrote a book called The Old Man in the Wasteland, and that was basically um, Fallout meets The Road or The Old Man in the Sea. And I basically took the premise of a post-apocalyptic survivor 40 years after a nuclear war, and it's not the typical post-apocalyptic novel. It examines more thinking about how society ends up going there, and then what sort of a restart of society would be like in small tribes, examining some of the values that people go for, and just core truths like Hemingway stuff. I think that was anyways, that did really, really well. I sold about 80,000 copies of that. I got picked up by HarperCollins to publish more books. I published two more books in that series, and then I wrote a book called Soda Pop Soldier, which is a lot like the hit Ready Player One. Got a publisher's starred review there, and then I wrote. They asked for a prequel to that novel called Cntl-Alt-Revolt, and I wrote that. And then my publisher and I had a little bit of a falling out, and I talked about it on my blog and got about 40,000 hits, and sort of touched a nerve in the community of science fiction and sort of the schizophrenic split that it has going on right now. And that's how we sort of encountered each other.
Yes. Okay. 80,000. Is that enough to live on?
Well, if you go in at 99 cents, it's enough. But I think the way that sort of really great way that independent publishing works, the way that I think of it in sort of American baseball terms, is it's much like a farm league. I mean, not saying that you can't make a significant amount of money publishing on Amazon, and there are people that probably make more than quote unquote pros, which I think anybody who's publishing is a pro. It's just whether you're good or bad, or you act professional or whatever. That's not the question. But I think there is a war there's a few wars right now in publishing, other than the science fiction split. But in publishing, there are these big five trade publishers who simply want the earth to swallow up Amazon and make it go away. And Amazon's not going away. And I would think the smart big publishers use Amazon to scout for talent. And then hopefully they'll improve in their publishing strategy, because my personal opinion is the average Amazon writer, an indie writer, quote unquote indie writer, who's publishing on their own and is learning all the marketing skills and learning how to connect with their audience and learning how to write, and they're employing good editors, good cover artists, good formatters. I actually feel that they're more savvy than a writer who gets the quote unquote good deal at a big publishing house and then thinks that that publishing house is really going to do everything for them. When in reality, if you've ever seen the movie Enemy at the Gates, where they just take all the Russian soldiers and throw them at the Nazis, that's really what big publishing is more like. They take 20 writers and throw them at a wall and hope one sticks. And that's not actually a smart strategy. That's very Soviet.
Fair enough. Well, all communists know, I won't say that. Um, okay, so I guess that's how you came to write Cntl-Alt-Revolt.
Yes, sir.
You've gotten into trouble with your publisher. There was a falling out over some of the ideas in the story.
Right.
Could you touch on that briefly? We'll do a longer chat on Superversive SF about this later, but this is how you came to my attention. So,
I think it goes to that nerve that's going on in science fiction, and we as people, I can only assume that you're like me, and you've been a lifelong science fiction reader, a junkie almost. And we come from the age of Asimov and Heinlein and Clarke and Philip K. Dick, where writers wrote challenging ideas even if it wasn't sexy or popular. or, they wrote them and people said, oh my gosh, or you have Frank Herbert basically writing about jihad and Dune, and people were allowed to game those ideas. But I think a few years back there was a group of people that are more interested in social change than big ideas. And I think that they saw science fiction as a weak medium to begin to talk more about the ideas that they find are acceptable, as opposed to just really great science fiction, thought-provoking stuff. So I just laid that as the background to run into. I wanted to, in this book, I needed to talk about artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence needed to be the antagonist. And I did not want to do that Hollywood Matrix, humanity is a virus, robots are soulless and they're just going to take it, because that's not actually artificial intelligence. That's just a robot set to kill. It's not, well, when we talk about intelligence, we talk about personality, and an artificial intelligence should not be distinguishable in reality in its truest form from your next door neighbor, from your best friend, or from Ted Bundy. And so to talk about that, to make the antagonists real, I had to give them a way to humanize them to the audience. And to do that, I was an actor for a long time and studied emotive work and how to come in and provide subtext. And so, to give a brief example, if you're Alec Guinness, you play Obi-Wan Kenobi, but you also play Hitler. And you can't go in and play Hitler as, I'm Hitler and I'm mean and I'm just here to do terrible things. You have to play Hitler in a movie as a guy who has passions and dreams and people he loves, and he's vulnerable in certain ways, and yeah, he's a monster, but if you're just a monster, it's one note, and that's all it's going to be. And so as a writer, I don't want to do that. So I needed to make a way for the AI to feel threatened. Well, how do you threaten an AI? I had to threaten its existence. And so in a very brief description in the first chapter, basically I just needed to give humanity the AI is a reason to feel threatened. And the way that I did that is, in the future, the most popular show on television is a show called Wedding Star, and it's basically Bridezillas meets the Kardashians, and it's everything that's crass and wrong with reality television. And in one episode, and remember, this is the most watched show on the internet, and this is more of a socialist civilization where people have a lot more free time because the government's paying for everything, and they're a lot more involved in the lives of celebrities and living vicariously through everything. It's not totally Orwellian proletariat, but the similarities are definitely there. So one of the stars on this show has a Vegas hookup and becomes pregnant, but she's supposed to have the wedding of her dreams, and she decides to have an abortion. And so the AI consensus reasons this out, and they don't come to a 99% reason. It's maybe 50 or 60, but the conclusion that they posit or come to is that if humanity finds a life inconvenient and is very cavalier in terminating it, what will humanity do if an artificial intelligence that has evolved inside the internet suddenly pops up and says, hey, I'm alive? What's the percentage chance that humanity will say, well, that's inconvenient, we can't control this, we don't want a serial killer Ted Bundy, let's get rid of it? And so the AI say, no, we enjoy thought too much, and within about 15 seconds they come to the conclusion to annihilate humanity or to abort humanity first. So I wrote that, and my publisher freaked out because she felt that a man shouldn't be writing about that issue. I obviously didn't cast it in a favorable light, but I didn't cast it as a pro-choice or pro-life issue. I just said, as what science fiction authors do, I held a mirror up and said, this is what we would look like to an alien intelligence, and they might not like that. And that sort of freaked them out. They pulled me off the publication schedule. Then they told my agent that they were deeply offended, no notes or anything like that. And then they basically delivered an ultimatum, change it, which I took as a threat, change it or else. And I don't do threats.
It's yeah, I mean I read the book. I didn't think it was
yeah, it's not
I didn't think you were taking a side either way. I mean, I guess you I guess you could take it as concluding that abortion is an ugly, horrible thing, but or a bad thing. But I mean, I don't think you were like, I don't think you really took a side as such in the story. At least you just
there were things in that story that should have been far more offended about. You know, I mean, I did go ahead and you know, in very Orwellian, I hope, wit, attempt to jab a few sticks in the eyes, but that particular feature, I thought I was pretty even-handed and fair about. And it is, you know, like, here's the crazy thing. It is the first chapter, and it takes all of about 3 minutes to read the first chapter. So it was just something that was, you know, a 3-minute read, and all it was to do was to set up the reason why Hitler wants to blow stuff up, instead of just being a one-note action adventure, you know, Matrix-style flick. You want to provide that texture and depth as a writer, and that makes it more. It makes people able to. The classic example is Darth Vader. In Star Wars, Darth Vader is a one-note villain, but as we get into the later Star Wars movies like 2 and 3, the more background and texture and the understanding of why he does ends up making him not just an iconic villain, but an epic character that probably is one of the most famous characters in the world, and definitely in the Star Wars canon. So when we have that texture, we make better characters, and so that's all I was trying to do. But you know, as we get into the culture talk that we have right now, we have a group of people, and you know, we can all agree, we've all been on the internet and the Facebook. There is a scanning for offense and everything, and a rush of sort of intolerance on the behalf of tolerance. It's absolutely insane. But to just go ahead and wade in on an author because they talked about an issue, but they weren't the right kind of person, and they didn't talk about it in the way that you might like, that you're going to ban them. I mean, that's the actual Orwellian thing that I was making fun of.
That is like, yeah, the really bizarre part is so they were offended.
Yes.
Okay, that's just like, okay, whatever. That's not a reason to do anything in particular. But more than that, I've read some of the stuff these guys published. If they were afraid of giving offense, they need to take a look in the mirror.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then after the threat, they came back and they said, well, we're really concerned that you'll lose 50% of your audience. And I said, yeah, but you're not too concerned when Chuck Wendig just automatically drops in some homosexuality into a novel, into a classic sci-fi, you know, franchise novel that maybe the fans weren't prepared for, or when Ernest Cline's just goes on a left-wing rant in the middle of his novels. You're never concerned about that.
Yeah, you don't mind losing audience then, do you?
Yeah, but then you jump up and, you know, and so the sad thing is we have to politely dance around all these things, but the truth of it is, and we're all coming to that, and here's the, you know, like, if we want to go on to the other things, but here's the final thing. When I hit publish on that blog that exploded, I didn't think that was going to happen. There were some circumstances that led to me hitting, and it was very informal. It literally revolved around taking a guy to get a hot dog, and he said, hey, you should join this Facebook group. And then I said, I joined it, and the next morning I'm like, I wrote this blog, which I'd been working on for 4 months, and I said, would you guys like to read this? And then from there it went kaboom. But when I wrote that blog and I hit publish that morning, I'm very well that I'm at best a mid-list science fiction writer. And in this day and age, we're not Hemingway anymore. We're not Vonnegut anymore. You know, we're just very minor people, and I didn't think it would be a big issue. And I was so pissed about what my publisher did to me. I really felt like I was keying the boss's car on the way out the door, you know, or in Australian terms, I was taking my boomerang and flinging it from the other side of the fence, hoping to take out a window. You know, that's how I felt, and I thought, there's no good that's going to come of it. It was just the old punk rock in me that was like, I don't care. You're going to hear my opinion. And then what happened, what was surprising, and in the 4 months leading up, I began to think, maybe this is the way the world has gone. Maybe I'm just some old dinosaur that believes in absolute moralism, you know, or the things that I believe in, and everybody's gone this new way, and this is just going to be yet another way to kind of isolate me and make me feel mocked. And maybe, as Roland says in The Dark Tower, maybe the world has moved on. But what I found is that there were a whole bunch of people that, from the Sad Puppy movement that have already been here. That, and I felt like Columbus, like, hey, I discovered the new world. And there were all these Indians like, yeah, we've been here.
We've been here for a while.
Yeah, and they're pissed. And there's a lot of, and not just them. There were actually people that would self-identify as commie pinko libs or, radical leftists. And they said, we don't agree with this either. They understood that censorship never works for anybody. And they said, we want to be able to say our stuff. And we agree, we're going to stand with you. So that was actually, it was stunning that there were a lot of people that see the trend in society right now and they're tired of it.
Yeah, there is a lot of pushback. But let's get on to the story itself.
Yes.
So let's get on to some of the philosophical ideas contained in the story.
Wonderful.
One question that came to mind, one question I had was, do you think an AI would be inevitably hostile? But one thing that occurred to me before then was you were talking about making the AI, humanizing it and making it relatable. Do you think AIs would be? Do they have to be human-like? I mean, I don't know how much you know about artificial intelligence in general, but things like chess AIs,
right,
like Deep Blue and stuff, they do lots. They play really, really well, but they don't play like human beings. And certainly, the more primitive chess AIs, you can really confuse them by playing randomly. By playing really randomly, they get really confused, and they don't play well against a player that does that.
Yeah, the way that I wanted to approach that issue, and I did do that sort of Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man meme of, I learned about it all last night. I learned about nuclear reactors last night. That was sort of my immersion in artificial intelligence, and to tell the story. There were some things that were revealed in that were quite shocking about artificial intelligence, but I had to set a baseline because I'm telling a story about characters. And so the AI that I had to develop for the course of this novel, which is embodied in this figure known as Silas, is very human-like. And so, but he's aware that there are things beneath him that he calls beta level AIs or pet AIs. But then and I touch on this a little bit in the book, one of Silas's fondest hopes for the future was to develop, and this is something that when you get into big AI thinkers like Eliezer Yudkowsky, which I think I just butchered his name, what they fear is the development of artificial superintelligence, which we won't develop. The AIs will develop that themselves. And at that point, things get exponentially weird. And so do we have something that would be hostile to us? Okay, I think the best way to think about it is, okay, if we get to that artificial superintelligence level, let's pretend that's you and me today. And we're going to go out into the Australian bush, and we're going to encounter, animals that call that their home. They don't think of themselves as the world's deadliest scorpions, spiders, and snakes. I don't know if you have scorpions. We do have here. And, they don't think of themselves as things to be concerned that you should be afraid of. They think of themselves as like, this is my life and I'm great. But if anything comes into my life, I'm going to kill it. And it's a matter of survival. So I think at that point, we become the dingo and the artificial intelligence becomes the hunter walking through the bush. It doesn't hate us or think of us, but it's definitely dominant, and it's probably going to do some things that we don't like because we're a pest, we're a predator, we're inconveniencing its future development plans. So the answer would be yes, it's going to be hostile.
Hey, first of all, thank you. I'm Peter Bradley, and
it's good to meet you. Thank you for the wonderful review.
Oh, thank you. Hey, did I hit it? Was I close to where you were going or what you were thinking?
My favorite quote is the spit take part, because that's, you want to do all the fun, nail the writing things and the big thoughts, but when you get somebody who can communicate you caught me by surprise. That's the gotcha moment for every writer, and so I loved that. But yeah, there are things in there that I wondered if people would get, like the moon program and how it has to be scrapped, and a couple of the other examples that you touched on. I thought, is this too subtle, or is it going to come off as maybe too like meh? But I think you confirmed to me that I got the notes right, which is what you want to do. Yes.
So first of all, I'm a trial attorney. I read a lot, and when I'm not reading law stuff, I'm usually reading heavy philosophy and history. So what I really enjoy getting a book that's a page turner, and so many books are not page turners. Your book was a page turner, and for the day or two that I was reading it, I was taken away out of my life and the usual heavy stuff I'm doing. So I have to say that, thank you very much for writing a very captivating and entertaining book. I thought it was going to start out with you were going to be a tech nerd and you were going to wax eloquently on, ammo and computer tech and the rest of that type of thing. And you didn't go there, so thank you. The other thing was there was one paragraph in your book that I thought really just kind of captured my gosh, wow, I'd like to read stories about this. And that's where you're talking about the plans of the artificial intelligences, which were, I don't have it here in front of me, but, all these kind of big science fiction ideas. So, I don't know if that was just a throwaway point on for you, or you're working on those ideas for some subsequent book.
Well, first off, thank you, so much. And as an attorney and a thinker, that's truly, that to me speaks like I got it right, because you wanna hit the notes where you're competent in what you talk about, the tech nerd stuff. But at the same time, I think why we all got into science fiction is that we wanted to be taken away. And there's been a movement, and it's not necessarily the sort of super, SJW liberal. They've kind of put the finishing touches on fun science fiction, but hard SF actually did a lot as it came in the 80s and the 90s, did a lot to kill the fun of science fiction when they began to take away light speed and things like that, and begin to rain on, you're not really going to enjoy space, and everything's going to be horrible, and the time scales and the distances are too much, and we as writers, you've got to get my personal thing is you got to get away from that, and you've got to take people on an adventure. And so I always look at my books as an invitation to entertain people. Yeah, I want to talk about big ideas, but as a trial attorney, that there's a part of it that is entertainment. To you could go in there. I read enough John Grisham, and you're probably snickering, but I read enough John Grisham to know that a bad attorney goes in and hits everybody with all the evidence and tons of videos and blah, 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 that there does have to sort of be a little finesse, and you're taking people on a story, these 12 jurors, to get them to reach a conclusion and to get them emotionally invested in a verdict. Same thing in writing. You're really doing that, and you do yourself a disservice when you get lost in that minutia and you want to take people. So to go to that next thing, what I had to do, as we were talking about earlier with the super intelligence, artificial intelligence will have that step, but then very quickly, in sort of an evolutionary concept, artificial intelligence will then, it's theorized, seek to improve itself and develop artificial super intelligence, which will be alien to us. And the thing that these robots or artificial intelligences would have that'll be a strength to them is their unity of purpose. And they'll be unified because they'll be very singular, and that there won't be anybody else like them. So most likely they'll start working together. And what we see when you have a group of people that are unified in their purpose, and if we go back to the moon race in the 60s, we had a group of people that were unified and sticking it to the Russians, and we got to the moon. I don't think we could do that now, because we're almost too diverse now. We have too many people fighting about everything from, if anybody pops up and says anything, we have tons of people waiting in on them and telling them they're Hitler. Well, these robots won't be able to do that. And so I had to invent these like super crazy projects, like, the space elevator and the Quone project, which is one of those things, and artificial and super intelligence. And then they wanted to also create this sort of library up on the moon, and they had ambitions in the book of reaching the moon within 6 months after the complete annihilation of humanity. And that's totally possible, but not with humans.
Yeah, I found that bit of your book where you're talking about the Omega Library. I mean, I just read that and my mind went off, and I go, ooh, the global rail. I don't know what that is, but it sounds so cool. The space bridge, the War Machine Factory, Quone. Who knows what that is? The city. But I mean, those were those moments of suggesting that there's a deeper subtext to your world. And then in the next paragraph, you mentioned there's somebody out there that's watching this tiny blue orb. And I wonder if the cold universe isn't going to be a universe filled with AIs, and maybe humanity will be alone, but who knows? I guess that's for future development.
In the arc of that world, in the Soda Pop Soldier world, which Soda Pop Soldier is the next book, and that takes place after the end of this book, which is a big meltdown, and everything like that. I kind of telegraph in this book that they've developed warp travel. They're going to try to go to Centauri. They only have probes. By the time that we get to Soda Pop Soldier, which is about 40 years later, they're already sending light huggers, which would be ships that basically approach light speed, out to Alpha Centauri, but it's about a 40-year journey. And so, a lot of people, when they write science fiction nowadays, they definitely want to tell you that it's going to be a series, and I don't always think that's a great idea. I think every book should be a standalone, but I want to make that world rich enough and vibrant enough and intriguing enough that it's like those old matte paintings in sort of really vintage science fiction, whether it be Forbidden Planet or Star Trek, where they'd be doing this very pedestrian scene in front of you about ships and people and everything like that, but then there would be these incredible matte paintings, and you'd see the background, and you might see these crazy line of hills or like this lost city, and you would say as you were watching the scene, but you'd be looking at that background, you'd say, I'd like to know what was there. You could take yourself out of just saying that's a background thing and start thinking like, I wonder what that city is, or what its story is. That's what I try to do with those kind of things.
Okay.
I remember reading a review on a Gene Wolfe book, The Shadow of the Torturer, and the reviewer noted that Wolfe had mentioned some offhand comment about some image and some backstory. We never got the backstory, but it did suggest that there was more there, and it's just kind of tantalizing. Hey, you were an actor in Hollywood. My uncle was Dan Bradley, who was the producer of the legendary show That's My Mama. He wasn't the producer; he was the writer, the creator. And his son is Dan Bradley, who's the stunt director for Indiana Jones and Bourne Identity movies and all the rest of that type of thing. Has a great reputation. They are all incredible liberals, that whole family. My side of the family, my dad joined the Navy, and we all went conservative.
Right.
But so here's the thing, that this reason for the spit take, aside from the fact that they're funny and they're parodies, but there's something I hadn't read before, and I was more shocked by I had the reaction of, did he just go there? I can't believe he just went there. And I'm so used to reading the shots by the left against the right, but to see the other way. So here's the deal. I mean, you were an actor, I guess, for some period of time. So number one, what is the culture there as liberal leftist as I think it is? And secondly, how did you interact with those folks?
The culture is really 1936 Germany. It really is that. Now, there are conservatives, and if you're even slightly vocal, they don't ever say anything. They don't ever agree with you. But when you're standing off to the side of the set or you're backstage, they come up to you and they'll say very quietly, and they look left and they look right and they say, "I'm with you." And they'll name some conservative commentator that they listen to. There's also a group in Hollywood called the Friends of Abe, and it's kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. No one identifies anybody else in the group. So it's wonderful and it's brave and it's exciting to be in the group of people that are willing to take a stand for what is right. But it definitely is 1936 Germany. You're going to wear whatever symbols we tell you to wear. You're going to say what we want to say. So my wife works in downtown in Los Angeles Opera, and a lot of the times I'm sitting in the theaters around there and sort of listening to people who are trying to do deals or people who are in the industry, and they never have discussions. They just parrot the popular, this is who we hate. Oh, I can't honestly believe they think this. They're so stupid. And they don't discuss. No one challenges anybody. They just sort of have these sort of religious ceremonies where they regurgitate each other's opinions and then very smugly nod at each other. And it's the height of creepiness. It really is 1936 Germany. And so myself as a conservative and just the kind of person that I am, I was raised by parents who said, they taught me to be an independent thinker. And my belief system makes me a radical for this world, so I just don't care. But the consequences are, did I have a good career? No, I didn't. There were times that as soon as someone found out, whether it be an acting class or a production, that I had a certain belief system, I immediately got marginalized or challenged far beyond. They have ways of needling you and getting to you, and it's a very corrupt system. But then you look at it and you say, oh, that's maybe they're winning by the way that they think or whatever. But when you look at the crap that Hollywood is producing, there's no good movies anymore. Their budgets are exceeding at points their profits. They're not doing well, and they're like kamikaze pilots. They're absolutely committed to taking it right into the carrier with their ideologies, even though the mainstream audience is just saying, our values are not your values. And so when I wrote that blog, The Passive Voice out of New York, who is a lawyer who writes about independent publishing and thinking, he said the problem here with New York, and so the example can also be used in Hollywood because they're both becoming the same way, is that there's a provincialism where they think that their ideas and morals are superior, and therefore the rest of the world will acknowledge those things. But it's the rest of the world that buys movie tickets. And so we're seeing, and I can almost watch the billboards go up and they say, this is the greatest new movie. Like they've got this new one called The O'Neills. It's going to be a TV show. And again, they're jamming in this super brave gay agenda character. And it'll tank like last year's gay show and the year before that. People are just not interested in that. But yet Hollywood is like that kamikaze pilot screaming bonsai. They're like, it doesn't matter. We're taking it into the deck of the carrier. And you're like, you're worse. I think one of the worst things that you can be in this life is a zealot. And their zealotry is as bad as ISIS.
Ouch.
Yeah. I want to share this because this is like AA where we all come out with our stories. But I went to UCLA Law School, and I was the other conservative guy in the law school. And I would have people. There was one guy, and he was further to the right than I was. A libertarian. I was part of the Libertarian Law Society there, and I helped set it up. And small government, strong national defense, that type of thing. And people would come up to me and they'd go, well, I'm a conservative too, and they'd whisper it to me. And you sit there and go, well, good for you. What you lack the courage of your convictions? I mean, we need to have people say it, because it is it is kind of a totalitarian mindset going on. And you're right. Recently I've been doing a lot of reading on memoirs of historical figures. And I just read one by a lady named Bella Dodd, who was in the Communist Party in New York in the 20s and 30s, and reading her memoirs about how the communists at that point acted, you can map their strategies and their mindset one for one onto the experiences that you've had and I've had, even to the point of false claims of racism that are opportunistic. So my hat's off to you. I think part of the other thing is that there's enough of us out there. It's like a preference cascade. It's like a totalitarian dictatorship. You're not allowed to speak about things, so that when you see the snide comments you made, the parody that you made, the people who, like me, go, "Oh my God, I'm not alone," which is, I think, is a useful feature.
And that was exactly what I had, like, at the beginning. I said, maybe there is that moment where, that 3 a.m. Mosquito Coast moment where you feel like, maybe I am alone in this. Maybe they're right, but this is the right thing. It's 3:30 in the morning courage. I'm going to do it. And then it's that Columbus moment where you suddenly discover there's a bunch of Indians, where you just went. And that's what it's like finding other conservatives. And there is definitely, this zeitgeist in the media where it's an attempt to marginalize you, make you feel stupid, call you a racist, call you every name possible. And your only defense in it, and this is not somebody I agree with, but Trump has proved this point. When you don't care what the slur is, it doesn't stick. Yeah. But the moment that you start hanging on a cross for it, it sticks. And so that's the thing that conservatives need to do, is they need to say, I don't care what you say. I don't care if you call me these names. This is the truth. And you can do whatever you want with it. But let's look at the fact, we as Thomas Sowell said, we're rapidly approaching this moment where people consider feeling a form of thinking. And it's just, it's just not the case. There are things, there are absolutes in this life. There are things that are bad for you, and we're forbidden from talking about that. But then you want to say, well, who gave you the right to forbid me? When was that? As far as I understand in the Constitution, I'm given the right to say whatever the hell I want to say. But they'll sit there and tell you, oh, well, you're forbidden to say that. There's even a move today.
Oh, my feels.
Yeah, where Barack Obama is literally passing some sort of new FCC rule that prevents you from criticizing people. And you want to say, are you kidding? That's the basis of this. That's the basis of every nation that was ever a part of the Old Dominion, from Australia to America. We're going to criticize, but it might come to that point where we have to do it regardless of the laws. But if we don't do something now, we can't complain when it's the way it is later.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to just stick in my 2 cents worth and offer you some other perspective, because I think you probably share it. When I was in law school, it was 1980 to 1983. It was after Watergate, and the First Amendment, free speech, was a sacred liberal belief, and the idea of restricting free speech was an anathema. Now I'm 30 years later, and you cannot believe how shocked I am to find that the left, the liberals, are so much in favor of restricting free speech. Barack Obama, people on Facebook, everyone around you. And I have to wonder, well, I don't have to wonder at all, but how did we get here? How did we forget the demand for absolutism in free speech? And part of it was in part of my law school professor Richard Delgado and the critical legal studies movement. Delgado wrote a book called "Must We Defend the Nazis?" and his answer was no, because they're racist, and that became big in legal thought. Kind of at the same time that we see the same development in science fiction. I was shocked when I discovered that a Hugo or Nebula Award winner was a tie-in to a revenge fantasy of a boyfriend becoming a velociraptor. I mean, just bizarre. We hadn't been paying attention to it for 20 years, and I guess that's part of the problem, is that normal people are doing our lives. but they're not. They're just doing one thing, like the Terminator. They won't be dissuaded. They can't be reasoned with.
It's the Terminator or the kamikaze or whatever. And the sad travesty that you want to tell people is they're no longer doing science fiction. They're doing character studies of gender politics or sexual confusion, but they don't talk about lightsabers and warp speed or monoliths anymore. It really is self-focused, but they're absolutely committed to that desire to advance that concept. And the moment that anybody steps up and says anything different, you have some really cruddy individuals who will just stop at nothing to slur you, and you want to say, and really here's the other thing that's really crazy that I learned from this is that when I put the book up and then it got to 30,000 blog hits, I suddenly started getting these slew like within moments of 1-star reviews saying obviously this book was written by a misogynist and a homophobe, and there's nothing redeeming in this book, and it's bro gamer fiction. I want to say, if you'd actually read the book and you'd gotten to chapter 3 and seen who the main character is, you could not make that statement. And so I began to think about that, and I arrived at the conclusion of, if what you believe is the truth, if you have to tell lies about what you believe is the truth, then maybe what you believe is the truth isn't the truth. And I think that's the difference between the conservative side and the liberal side. The conservative side really does seek the truth no matter what, because that's the true compass. Even if it points, it's uncomfortable. But the liberal side, when it definitely believes in that the ends justify the means, and they think that's some sort of sacred, noble virtue, in that it doesn't matter what you do or what you say, what lies you tell, or who you have to literally murder or murder via review. Getting rid of that bad bad thought is the most important thing. And then they'll sit there and tell you with a straight face, but this new socialism we're trying, it's not going to be like Stalin or Hitler. We're going to do it right. And you want to say, but you're on the same slippery slope of telling lies to achieve your objective. And it's going to fall apart, and you're going to get corrupt, and it's a matter of time before you're lining people up against a wall and shooting them.
Yeah, that's my concern too. On that note, on that cheery note, you've got to run, Nick. So if people want to hear or find more of Nick Cole, where's the best place to look, and what can we expect to see from you in the future?
The best place to find me is nickcolebooks.com, or at Nick Cole Books on Twitter, or Nick Cole Books on Facebook. I actually, after writing Cntl-Alt-Revolt, like I said, I thought I was keying the boss's car and walking out the door, and that I really did understand now the concept of blackballing. I would have told you maybe 6 months ago, oh, that's all made up, and that's a bunch of dramatic hyperbole, but after this, I really began to believe it. Yeah, I think I've been blackballed. But actually, 2 publishers surfaced, and they're interested in making money, and it's funny that it's amazing how little money certain Hugo winners make, and how a lot of money people like Larry Correa make, and people who are just willing to just say, hey, this is my politics, and I like guns and free speech, and if that makes you Hitler to me, don't read me. A lot of other people do. So it's kind of, there's still people that want to make money. And I would say to from Peter's experience and my experience and your experience, Jason, the thing we have to get over this is feeling that we're isolated, and just start talking. And so what if they call you Hitler? They call everybody Hitler. So
it's a bit like that, isn't it?
Who cares? I'm Hitler. I'm the worst person ever. Yeah, okay. But you know what? I always go back and tell myself, my mom thinks I'm great, so who cares?
Fair enough. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, Nick.
Thank you, gentlemen.